I open up the regular scheduled meeting of the Oceanside School Board for June 9th, 2020. I'll call the roll for the opening of this meeting. Board member Eric Joyce. Present. Board member Stacy Begin.
Present.
Board member Eleanor Evans.
Present.
Board member Raquel Alvarez.
Present.
Great, we're all here. 5 of us are here. We had closed session this afternoon from 5 to 6, but we have no items to report out to the general public at this time on the items we discussed. Item 2C is a motion to approve the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Great, got a motion and a second. I think I'll try this for that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 3, Superintendent's report.
Yes, good evening, trustees. I have just a couple of things to share with you. We're very excited to let you know that we're having our virtual graduations aired on KOCT this Thursday with Ocean Shores at Ditmar at 11 o'clock, Oceanside High School at 2 o'clock, and El Camino at 5 o'clock. So you can access that from anywhere you can reach KOCT. So we're super excited to have that. And in terms of reopening, and on May 20th, we engaged 180 stakeholders into 23 different work groups trying to work on the solution of how to reopen our schools. The work groups just finished today with our last committee meeting. So at our June 23rd board meeting, we will bring a summary of our recommendations with proposed schedules. And what we want everybody to know is that we will constantly adjust our plans to ensure that we follow the California Department of Public Health guidelines. And to let you all know that the California Department of Education just released their guidebook yesterday, all 60-something pages. So we'll be combing through that, but we will bring you our most current thoughts on June 23rd. And we will continue to keep the community and our staff updated as things change throughout the summer.
Oh, no. There we go. Thank you for that report. Appreciate it. Next item is board reports. We'll start with Raquel Alvarez.
Actually, I've been just kind of doing the same, still doing the food handouts to our families within the district. I actually also went and was on the Oceanside campus for checkout for seniors and cap and gowns and stuff, and just seeing their faces and just how they're excited about what they're getting for graduation. I love that they're happy with what they're getting and finalizing just and getting to move on to their next point and their next adventures. And so just the staff itself as a whole and just how they're making everything happen. It was running very smoothly. I love the social distancing because it was completely happening. And the administration there it was amazing. So thank you all. Again, for our families that are coming out and helping in the food service department area of just handing out our food today. We had an amazing turnout again, and they moved the food pantry over to Mission from Oceanside High School, and so families were completely blessed with stuff there. And just on Zoom meetings that just never seem to stop. Again, looking to try and get additional monies into our district because it's going to be a new process and a different process in how we're doing things. So just again, amazed by our students and just the continued want and desire to learn. Thank you all for continuing to push on. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Board member Stacy Begin.
Hello, everyone.
I only have two things I've been working on besides my day job, but I was lucky enough to go to the Oceanside Technology Committee meeting held virtually on June 1st. And we kind of did a recap of all the work that we've done with our planning team and all the stakeholders moving forward with technology. This digital learning is actually quite relevant. And I did a really informative meeting on June 4th, and it was the Oceanside Special Education Parent panel that we had, and we are getting groups of parents together to start having conversations and network about what we can do to support their students. That was good, and I really look forward to going to Surfside, formerly known as Ditmar, graduation on Thursday.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Eleanor Adams?
Most of my meetings have been Zoom.
Most of my meetings have been Zoom meetings, and the North County San Diego NAACP town meeting, in which titled "We Were Tired of Dying," which was the opportunity for the law enforcement agencies of North County to come together and share in terms of how we build community. I also attended California Teachers Association State Council Representative Assembly. And again, you know, we really need to focus on the upcoming election in terms of funding our schools. And that's basically it.
Thanks, Eleanor. Finally, Eric, Joyce?
So I've been attending more webinars than I care to remember. So I'll just speak to two brief things. One, another congratulations to our seniors who facing a challenge that no other senior class has ever faced before. And they're graduating into a world that is filled with more uncertainty than we've seen in a long time. So stay close. Tell each other you love each other, and congratulations. We're so proud of all the work you've done. I'm looking forward to being at Oceanside on Thursday to see the drive-through. One of the biggest highlights of the time I've been here was the last graduation day. It's the best way to see the community come together. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again. The second thing I'd like to speak to is the tremendous and overwhelming at times pain that a lot of our community members are feeling. The events that we've seen go national surrounding Breonna Taylor and George Floyd are really heavy, and everybody feels them in different ways. So I just want to say, tell your children that you love them, and for everyone in our community, know that we are dedicated to having the difficult conversations that need to be had. So we appreciate you all being part of that work with us, and working to make our community stronger through all these times. So thank you again.
Well said, Eric. I know all the board members feel likewise about the national tragedy and the conversations that are coming out now, and we'll continue to have as we go through and fix this thing. All right. Let's move on to the consent calendar. Item 5, the general consent calendars. We have items A through T. Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? No. I'll just go do a call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item 7A, personnel. It's a resolution number 2819-20, the elimination of the classified management position and hours for 2020 to 2021 due to district reorganization. You have a staff presentation?
Just some information. Good evening, board members.
There's Todd.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. On this item, we're doing for district efficiency, we're doing a reorganization. Part of that is in nutrition services. And as part of that, we're going to eliminate this position. This is a management position. It's the manager for nutrition services.
Thank you very much for that, Todd. Is there any questions for staff? We have no public to speak on this matter, so I will ask for a motion to approve item 7.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I second it.
We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Very good. Thank you, guys. All right. Item 7B is ratification of negotiated agreement between the Oceanside Unified School District and the Oceanside Teachers Association. We have a presentation from staff.
Hi, it's Todd McAteer again, and I'll speak to this one. I just want to take a second to acknowledge the work that we've done with our teachers union, and we really appreciate them coming forward and showing the type of leadership and collaboration for us to be able to enter agreement and have a negotiated contract for the 2020-21 school year. This is the most effective work I think we've done together, and it's allowed us to free up our time and energy into the current challenges that we're facing for reopening and all the new assignments that we're up against. So very happy that this was ratified with a 99% approval by the ODA members. And that the district is pleased to present this to the board tonight.
Great. Thank you very much, Todd. We do have a public member who has submitted a request to speak. Would Todd Madison like to join us right now? Staff, can you arrange that?
Todd, we can't hear you, so you're going to have to unmute.
Okay, is that better? Sorry about that. Are we on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. The screen started jumping around when you guys accepted my picture. So anyway, first, I'd like to say thanks to the district and OTA for coming to a quick agreement on this. As you know, I've been very critical of the negotiating process and the results of that in the past. I thought I'd congratulate everyone for doing the right thing now, especially given the crisis that we're in. I hope this cooperation extends through the fall when we should be coming out of the peak of the COVID crisis and looking at ways to make sure our kids get the education they deserve first and foremost. With that, I've got to point out a couple of things just because I'm a bit of a stickler for this stuff. It's my parent advocate side coming out. Let's take a look at the AB 1200 disclosure document in the agenda. California Code 3540.2a requires that the district provide the COE with a copy of the final disclosure 10 working days prior to approval of any labor agreement. I don't have a copy of the COE's response letter. I've requested that. But given the disclosure was signed 4 days ago, it's impossible for it to have been given to the COE 10 working days in advance. That makes the process tonight a possible violation of that law, and any board approval tonight may be invalid as a result, but I'm sure that won't stop anyone from doing it. This has happened multiple times in the past. I've discussed with the COE. I know they're not interested in enforcing such laws designed to make sure parents and the board know the impact of what they're being asked to sign. It is, of course, a bit moot at this time because there's no fiscal impact. It's just the principle of it. Second, now would have been a great time to negotiate some of the other clauses of that agreement, some of which could be changed to save the district money in the future, have no impact except to make it for clearer terms. I've outlined these for the board in the past, so I won't go through them here. If the projected cuts do become necessary, of course, we'll see that failure to negotiate properly come back to us. We'll be here talking about that at that time. I realize that proactively looking ahead and solving the problems we know will come to us is not generally on the agenda. Dollars are going to be hard to come by for the near future. Let's hope this is the beginning of a trend where we focus on how to best spend those dollars on our kids' education when paid for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Appreciate your comments as always. We do not have any other comments on this item. Bring it back to the board. Does the board have any questions or issues for staff about this? Might ask staff to maybe respond to the issue Mr. Madison raised about the timing of the review by the state or by the county board of education. And it appears to me that they're in the loop, whether it's a day or two in arrears is, I don't think, an issue that will go to war over. But are we comfortable in adopting this tonight and staff's recommendation?
I'm not uncomfortable.
All right. I was asking more if staff was comfortable in
Shannon, do
continuing
you
the
want to share your
recommendation.
communication with the county?
There we go.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, trustees. And I did have a lengthy conversation this afternoon with our County Office of Education. They have been working with us collaboratively since May 28th. And so what we typically begin the process as soon as we reach a tentative agreement with either bargaining unit. We are in constant communication with the county. Our clock really starts from that first communication with the notification of the county, and then we began working on the financial documents in collaboration. There's many revisions prior to actually coming to the board, and before actually a signature is requested from either Dr. Vitale or myself as in support of this. The county is fully aware of our intent to bring this action forward to the board for consideration, and they are in full support.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that update. So, all right. With no further discussion, do I have a motion for ratifying and approving the negotiated agreement between OUSD and the Oceanside Teachers Association?
I'll make a motion.
I second.
We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much, and thank you to OTA. All right. The next couple of items are public hearings. Item 8, curriculum and instruction. We have a public hearing on the local control accountability plan, COVID-19 report to the community. I hereby open up the public hearing. Is there anyone to speak to us on that matter? There is none on our list or pending out in Zoom land, so I will close the public hearing. The next item would be 8B, adoption of the 2020-21 local control accountability plan, COVID-19 report to the community. Is there any discussion or concern among the board members? You have a presentation, okay? Great. Dr. Levy.
The County Board of Trustees, yes, this is Dr. Levy. I'm the Associate Superintendent of Educational Support Services. And tonight I'm going to be sharing with you the COVID-19 operations report to the community. This report has been established in lieu of the LCAP this spring in response to the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please. This presentation will include information on the draft LCAP goals established by our LCAP committee in February of 2020. It will also include how the state requirements for the LCAP were adjusted in light of the COVID-19 crisis. And finally, we will have an overview of the COVID-19 operations report to the community. Next slide, please. Starting in the fall of 2019, the LCAP committee comprises stakeholders of the community, parents, guardians, teachers, and classified staff came together to examine our LCAP plan and establish goals for the next 3 years. As the committee met together, we examined data, we looked at our programs, we looked at our activities, and we decided that we wanted to look at how we could update the 3 goals we have for the LCAP. So as we worked together in consensus, we came up with draft goals that would have been presented to you at this time. These 3 goals include Goal 1, which is all students graduate prepared for college and or career. Goal 2, that we have create safe and positive learning environments. And goal 3, meaningful family and community engagement. These goals reflect the values of our community and have continued to guide our work as the district addressed the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please. After March 16th, with the physical closure of schools and the establishment of the California stay-at-home order, the state realized that an adjustment to the LCAP process was in order. This was because of the challenges of engaging our stakeholders equitably and fairly during the early part of the pandemic. Next slide, please. The governor issued Executive Order N5920 on April 22nd, 2020, extending the local LCAP deadline to December 2020, and waived the adoption of an LCAP with the district budget, and also waived the reporting of dashboard data as the CAS testing for students did not occur this spring. It also waived the PE instructional minutes and fitness testing. Next slide. As part of the governor's educational priorities in response to COVID-19, he identified 3 priorities for local districts to address. These were maintaining learning for all pupils, including especially our at-promise students, continuing with providing food to students, and supervision of students for the critical care workforce during normal school hours, especially for those people like doctors and nurses on the front line. Next slide. The district's efforts to address these 3 priorities were reported to the community through the COVID-19 operations report to the community. This report, next slide, please. The purpose of this report is for people to have a better understanding of the efforts that the district, teachers, classified staff, and administrators made during physical school shutdown and the stay-at-home orders in order to provide for the learning, nutrition, and support of the community by Ocean Unified School District. Next slide, please. This report would be adopted by the Board of Education and posted on our district website for public viewing, along with a copy of our 2019 LCAP, which will be in effect until we adopt in December our new LCAP. Next slide. As in all things, we believe that our community outreach is essential. The governor asked local districts to reach out to the community to the extent possible. Our outreach included virtual meetings, parent and guardian surveys, and staff meetings, and surveys to the entire community. Next slide, please. At the virtual meetings, 3 focus questions were asked about our services to the community. These include meal distribution, distance learning, challenges that were being faced by our families and community, and how we followed the CDC and California health guidelines for social distancing. Next slide, please. Under the leadership of Mr. Moon, our Chief Technology Officer, a technology survey was sent to students, staff, and families. This Bright Bite survey included questions about remote learning, which we've also called distance learning. We had a large group of families reply, and there was much to be happy about. Most said that they got help with assignments and technology when they needed it. And at the same time, they reported challenges with assignments and technology. They also reported challenges with navigating the expectations from multiple classes and with multiple children, and also a desire for alignment in the educational platforms for students during distance learning. Next slide, please. We also held a district parent advisory committee meeting with over 150 people participating over Zoom. The feedback from this meeting was overall very positive. Families praised the efforts of teachers and staff to connect with them and provide them with the supports for learning and with basic needs. Families expressed that their own tech skills had increased with distance learning and that teachers' support was key to their learning new technologies. The families also expressed the desire to reestablish grades for students in the fall a desire to be very thoughtful about what we decide to do in the fall for the health and safety needs of students. They talked about needing more support for families with distance learning and an alignment of the scheduling to support students' participation in distance learning. Next slide, please. We also asked families and staff about returning to school in the fall. A majority of families who responded preferred traditional school if all health and safety measures were put in place. A majority of staff reported they preferred a hybrid model, with some learning taking place distance and some of it being on site. Both groups were very thoughtful about wanting to make sure that all safety precautions were followed. A smaller group of both staff and families expressed a preference for a 100% distance learning program in the fall. Next slide, please. This is an example of the template for the COVID-19 operations written report. This report is limited to no more than 300 words in response to each question. This is quite a change from our LCAPs that have typically been over 100 pages long. The idea behind this is that it would be more accessible and clearer for families and community to read. Next slide, please. There were a series of prompts, 5 prompts about this report. The first prompt talks about the changes that we've provided to the community in response to the COVID-19 stay-home order and physical closure of schools. It also asked about the impact of school closures on students and families in our community. Next slide, please. Our program changes over the last 11 weeks have been extensive. March 13 was the last day of in-person classes. On March 18, distance learning started with paper packets, teachers hosting online classes, building Google Classrooms, and over time, the distribution of over 5,400 devices to students for use in distance learning. We also facilitated acquiring Wi-Fi for families and provided them with opportunities to connect with our local providers. Video meetings and professional learning were all done remotely. Oceanside also focused on wellness and emotional help for all students. Dr. Vitale challenged us to connect with all of our students to make sure that we were providing support. Through our Connected and Contacted Wellness program, led by our principals and assistant principals, we were able to contact 99% of all students who were with us prior to the physical closure of school. While missing even one student is too much, at last count, only 15 students had not been contacted by school staff as of last week. This connection allowed for the identification of student needs, referrals to health and mental health supports, food supports distribution of devices, learning tools, and the facilitation of connectivity to learning opportunities. Next slide, please. This chart talks about our distance learning model, which uses both synchronistic and asynchronistic and unplugged learning. Synchronistic learning takes place online or in person at a distance. Asynchronistic learning can be done virtually or in person, but without the teacher and students interacting in real time. Unplugged time is work and activities students do without relying on digital technology. Next slide, please. The family and student challenges presented by C19 were extensive. Early in our closure, we found that learning new technology and accessing Wi-Fi was a major challenge for our families. Distance learning continued, and as it continued, families reported that there were more challenges with managing student learning at home and balancing those with the multiple obligations at home than on the Wi-Fi. We also know that our community is experiencing job loss and income loss. These were all things that we found parents to be facing with challenges. Families also talked about a challenge with multiple platforms that were being used, and communication was seen as both too much, not enough, and just right by different parents. Next slide, please. Our prompt 2 focused on meeting the needs of our at-promise students. Next one, please. Court-identified foster youth had services provided to them, including individual contact by site coordinators, access to EDB cards, work packets delivered to them, and service referrals and resource vouchers hand-delivered to them, and outreach to them on a regular basis to check in on how they were doing. Next slide, please. Our English learners had special lessons and support for instruction designed for them by our English Learner Department and designated ELD teachers. Our teachers worked hard to ensure that our students' language development was continuing through distance learning. Next slide, please. Our students with special needs were addressed to the fullest extent possible through collaboration, consultation, direct virtual services, and IEPs during the physical school closure. As time has gone on, we have learned more about the opportunities and ways that we can connect virtually with our students with special needs, including identifying platforms that support speech-language pathologists and their specialized programs. We also created an internal website that was there to help our educational specialist teachers and with resources and guidance for our students with special needs. Next slide, please. Continuing to provide the highest quality instructional program to students was the focus of Prompt 3 of the COVID-19 report. Next slide, please. The heart of our distance learning, just like the heart of education, are our teachers. The classroom teachers overnight identified ways to connect with their students remotely. They spent hundreds of hours learning new technologies, establishing virtual classrooms, and reaching out to families. Their efforts ensured that students learned and grew during this distance learning time. Next slide, please. The team at ESS developed multiple resources in collaboration with classroom teachers to support families with distance learning. One example of this was a family learning schedule that we provided to families to help them guide them in supporting their students' learning. Next slide, please. We also work to establish websites, both internal and community-facing, to support our families and staff. This slide shows the front page of the community-facing distance learning website and the internal resources that are available on our web pages for all of our staff. Each website has extensive resources to support distance learning and build the capacity of our staff and families. Next slide, please. Our district is committed to learning across the curriculum. Teachers have used many different technologies to connect with students, and one example is our elementary music teachers who have used a digital tool to create a concert for students this spring. I'm not sure if we're able to hear them today, but please check out the YouTube video to see and hear our wonderful students as they perform. Next slide, please. Prompt 4 focuses on providing school meals and nutrition to our community. Next slide, please. Under the leadership of Dr. Soto and through the dedication of our food service workers, our campus security, employee and community volunteers, our district has provided over 532,000 meals since physical school shutdown. These meals are grab and go and do not require paperwork, thus ensuring that all those who need will be able to access the food. Physical distancing is maintained throughout the process in order to protect the health of our staff and students. Next slide, please. The final prompt asks about school supervision for students during ordinary school hours. Next slide, please. Throughout San Diego County, school districts have worked with the San Diego County Office of Education to monitor the need for student supervision during the stay-home order. Essential workers who are not under the stay-home order were contacted by SDCOE to identify their needs for student supervision. For the families in our community, about 50 essential workers were identified and supported by SDCOE to allow us to provide referrals to open childcare opportunities. And we are looking to support local agencies in providing childcare in the summer to essential workers by sharing our facilities. Thank you so much for our support of our programs. And I would like to commend our staff who overnight has transformed education, worked hard to do as much as they can, for as many as they can, for as long as they can, to ensure that our students are receiving the services they need. Thank you very much. And it concludes our report on the COVID-19 report to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Lovey. Appreciate it. Well done. Are there any questions for Dr. Lovey?
I have 2 points, please.
Absolutely.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Lovey, for your report, and thank you to the staff for your continued work in this endeavor to help our students and our families to overcome the shortages as a result of COVID-19. My first point is that our school site parking lots, do they offer, or can anyone possibly have internet access by being in their car and using a computer or cell phone or whatever? Is that possible?
Ms. Evans, yes, we discussed this at one point, but early on with the stay-home order, we were concerned about safety and security of families being in the parking lots, possibly at times where we couldn't provide the adequate supervision. So it is something that I know neighboring districts have looked into, and something that I know we continue to be thinking about. But again, making sure that we have the supervision and security for our community if we were to do that.
Okay, which brings up the next point. Basically, what is the district doing to enable our foster students to obtain internet access? You know, either some agreement with Cox or AT&T or et cetera, or our own possibly in-house communication services.
Yes, so we hand-delivered devices. Oh, I'm sorry.
Getting the internet access. I know we've given out lots of devices.
I believe at this time we are looking into opportunities to provide internet service, and that we are working on that with for the fall.
Not to miss another opportunity, but we have 109 people attending right now. If every single one of those voices called our representatives, both the state and federal level, to say Wi-Fi needs to be provided to every student who does not have it because otherwise they cannot access education, I cannot encourage you enough to say that. We are banging on as many doors as we can to beg that our students access internet. Please help us with this. We know they'll hear you if you reach out. Sorry, didn't want to miss that moment.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce.
You nailed it there. Thank you so much. This item needs an adoption. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Well, I'll go. All right. The motion was by Dr. Stacy Begin and the second by Eleanor Evans. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0 to adopt the LCAP this season of the COVID-19 report. Thank you so much, you guys. And thanks, staff, for that work. Item 9A, approval of extension of term for grant funding for before and after school programs. There was a staff presentation on that. Dr. Levy?
Yes, Mr. Blessing. This is a formality so that we can use our after-school funds that may be in remaining for this year in the fall. So it extends our opportunity to expend these funds to provide after-school programs in the fall for our students.
Great. All right. Any questions for staff? No public comment on this item. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Got a motion by Member Evans.
Second.
I got a second by Member Alvarez. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one. Motion carries 5-0. All right, the next item is item 11 under business. It's a public hearing. This is to approve an increase in the statutory school facility fees imposed on new residential, commercial, and industrial development construction within the city of Oceanside, within our school district boundaries, to be more precise. This is a public hearing. I'll open it up for a staff presentation, and then we'll take any public comments if we have any. Staff?
Yes, good evening again, trustees. Staff is requesting board approval to increase our developer fees authorized under section 17620 of the Education Code. So this increase has a potential revenue to OUSD of approximately $175,000 annually, and it is something that is within the board's purview to increase fees.
Great, thank you very much. We have no public to speak on this item 11A. That was the public hearing, so we close the public hearing and answer questions. And now we need consideration of a resolution number 3019-20 to increase the statutory school fees imposed on new residential and commercial industrial development projects pursuant to the Education Code, section 17620. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Got a motion?
No second.
And I got a second from Member Alvarez. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No one. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right. Now we're to the budget, to the big item. We do have one public member to speak on this, but that'll be after we have the public, the staff presentation. So item 11C, public hearing, proposed 2020-2021 preliminary budget adoption. Take it away, staff.
Thank you, trustees. Good evening, President Blessing, Superintendent Vitale, and esteemed board. As the presentation begins to be loaded, I just want to be displayed. Tonight, staff will be presenting the preliminary adopted budget. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment and introduce our Director of Fiscal Services, Tim Golden, who will also be co-presenting with me. So with that, we will begin our presentation. And next slide, please, Mr. Milne. So staff will be presenting on the economic background due to the COVID-19 and discussing the assumption of the preliminary adopted budget, review the proposed preliminary adopted budget and the MYP. Since we'll be continuing to remain in a qualified budget status, staff will be presenting some considerations for reductions. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 has been rough for multiple reasons, as we all are aware. On March 19th, the California economy ceased. This is extremely problematic, as California ranks 5th among the world's largest economies, which includes the United States, China, Japan, and Germany. This makes the state highly susceptible to national and global economic shocks, as we are currently experiencing. Adding to the decline in revenue is the postponement and deferment of state income and property taxes. Again, this means that the state is not receiving revenue for now. As such, the Department of Finance announced a $54 billion budget deficit. Nonetheless, the state legislature is still required to adopt a budget by June 15th. And with that, the preliminary budget staff is presenting tonight is based on the current proposed budget from the governor's May revise, with the understanding that there is credible indications of changes to the projections forthcoming. At this time, I'd like to reintroduce Fiscal Director Tim Golden, who will begin the presentation. Next slide, please.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Vitale. I'll be talking here about the multi-year projections, and I'll start here with the reminders and assumptions here. So in January, the governor anticipated a 2.29% COLA for the upcoming year that we have. And if you remember in our third interim presentation, we reported a 2.31% statutory COLA because that's what the numbers ended up coming in. But we did make note that there's a caveat with that. That caveat is going to be the deficit factor. So we were thinking that they were going to wipe away some of that money. We just didn't know where it would land. So when the deficit factor came in, it was a 10% reduction. So in order to get to the revised COLA, what statutorily happens is they apply the 2.31% COLA to your LCFF funding, and then they take a 10% reduction off of that. And the net effect of that is the 7.92%. And as was reminded at the governor's May revise from school services, they outlined that you can't just subtract percentages, that when you're dealing with percentages, you have to consider the dollar amounts. And that's why it's not just a clean 10% reduction from the 2.31. But to elaborate a little bit on that, the governor proposed contributions to pension liability for STRS and PERS, and that would equate to about $400,000 in savings. So you notice there the projected employer costs for STRS and PERS. For STRS, it was 18.4% projected next year and 22.68% for PERS. And with the governor's proposed pension contribution, that would bring the numbers down to 16.15% for STRS and 20.7% for PERS for the upcoming year. And then as we outline some of the other assumptions down below here, that assuming a decline in enrollment of 410 scholars, 5% increase in our medical premiums, and then a 23% for the property and liability insurance. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're going to outline the third interim budget compared to our proposed budget. The third interim budget is oftentimes going to look very different from your adopted budget because there's a lot more revenue that's categorical that has come in, and any carryover might be in there. So you're going to get some inflated numbers in your expenditures as well as a little bit in the revenue. But what I want to outline here is the difference in loss in revenue as a result to that LCFF cut of 7.92%. So when you look at it, there's a loss in revenue here of about $25 million from what we received this year to next year. That's not all attributed to LCFF, but a good chunk of that is coming from that LCFF reduction. This creates a substantial deficit in our upcoming fiscal year, leaving our ending fund balance with only $2.8 million at the end of next year based on our projection. Next slide, please. On this slide, we'll go through the components of the ending fund balance with the same comparison to third interim. The non-spendables as stores, those and inventory revolving cash, those remain unchanged in the projection here. Really, what we would have to do is forfeit the assigned items. We had some assignments in the prior year for certain things that we were hoping to do, but in order to maintain a positive ending fund balance, we have to forfeit some of those assignments. So the reserve would drop slightly because as our expenditures decrease a little bit, then obviously the reserve that we would need, the 5% would then come down a little bit because it's based on that 5% of your expenditures. And really here, what to outline is that the ending fund balance absorbs the huge deficit that happens when we lose this revenue that the state is proposing or that the governor is proposing. Next slide, please. And now we'll talk a little bit about the multi-year projection. Next slide, please. You will see here the 3-year projection for 2021, 21-22, and 22-23. With the cuts included here from the May revision from the governor's proposal, and you'll see the effect on our ending fund balance. So you'll see here the decreased revenues in each of these years based on this projection, because the governor's not only projecting that it would be this 10% deficit factor, but there's some things out there that are saying it could be worse in the future beyond that. So it's a little bit daunting, I know, to look at. I'm hoping that there's some kind of balance between the legislature and the governor's proposal here. But some of the things that we're going to need to consider are reductions to combat some of these shortfalls in the revenue. So in each of these years, we do not meet the 5% reserve requirement. And if we did consider 3% state minimum requirement, we would still be short from meeting that requirement as well. But just want to make sure that I present all those different options there. Next slide, please. And on this slide, it will again be the multi-year projection, but for the ending fund balance items, the components. And you'll see here the non-spendable, the restricted balances, and really what to look at is at that second year out. When we look at the ending fund balance, you'll notice that both in the second and third year, both of those are negative values. And with that, I will reintroduce Dr. Soto to talk about some of the next steps. Next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. As we previously mentioned, that we are required to present a fiscal stabilization plan due to our qualified status, and that the budget we're presenting this evening is based upon our current trend analysis based on our historical past practice and our typical assumptions. So this does not take into consideration any possible reductions or areas that we need to address. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so this becomes the dreaded consideration if the governor and the legislators cannot come to an agreement. This is based upon, as Mr. Golden mentioned, not being able to meet our current and future requirements and financial liabilities. This is still assuming that we maintain our board policy of 5%. And so this also assumes that we are budgeting under the current May revise, and that we would have a significant budget shortfall for the current year and the 2 years out, called our multi-year projection. Staff would be evaluating the listed considerations in order to have a balanced budget for the year 2020-21, and we would be taking them year by year. It's important to note that the Federal CARES Act, as noted here on this slide, has not allocated to OUSD, has not been budgeted as revenue. We have not received it as revenue, and it will not be booked as revenue until it is received. That is at the advice of our financial advisors to the County Office of Education. Staff recognizes these considerations may not be necessary, and the budget being presented tonight will look significantly different when we present the final adopted budget on June 23rd, pending conversation and agreement between the governor and the legislator. However, if a decision is not made by June 15th, and when we present on June 23rd, some of these considerations will be brought to the board for future expenditure reductions for consideration. We know that this is very disconcerting on multiple levels, and so we are trying to, as staff has mentioned, make sure that we are evaluating any and all possibilities. We also recognize that at adopted budget, June 23rd, while we will be bringing considerations, we do not have to enact the cuts or expenditure reductions or possible increases of revenue until the first interim. So again, we will be just making considerations for options, but the actual action would not have to take place until first interim in December. Next slide, please. So we know that there's a lot of unknowns. There's more unknowns and questions than knowns at this time. And unfortunately, we are in the state of following the May revise and having requirements and mandates to present a preliminary budget for consideration for the board, and that we will continue to monitor all legislative discussions and future actions on the governor's final budget. Staff will continue to seek answers to many unknowns that may have budgetary impacts. Next slide, please.
With that, staff is asking for approval of the preliminary adopted budget, and that we will be bringing a final adopted budget on June 23rd for board approval again. And with that, we would like to thank you for your time and be available for any questions that board may have.
Thank you, Shannon. That was very informative. We appreciate the summation of bad news. It's best you did it. We do have one public member that would like to address this item. This is just a comment.
Todd Madison.
Hey, work that time. Thanks. So great job by Dr. Soto and her staff in putting this together. I know it's required, there's no way around it. But even in normal times, I'm sure putting the budget together is challenging. It's got to be even more so right now. In the budget, we see the bloodbath that was predicted in the third interim with the deficit spending next year. We'll see if it's that bad. I hope not. But regardless, I'm sure we'll see some cuts ahead. We already had a structural deficit before the crisis. The district sidestepped that problem in the past, generally cutting from programs and services for our kids instead of solving the problem long term. Now that we have to do something, it would be a great time to take action to help solve this problem in ways that have minimal impact on kids while putting us on a better path to the future overall. Next year, we need to make $11 million in cuts, apparently. What if we did that in ways that create the least pain for our kids for a change? Let's take a look at some areas of the budget where we could make some adjustments in ways that would not hurt the education of our kids nearly as much. In 2020, the Society of HR Managers estimates the average large private employer pays 70% of their employee health care premiums. OUSD, on the other hand, pays 100% for most of its employees. The district will spend $27.5 million next year on employee health care. Rather than freezing pay, cutting salaries, cutting the length of the school year, or laying people off, what if we simply provided the same level of benefits to district employees that every parent and child in the district typically gets? That would reduce our deficit by over $8 million, most of the deficit that we need to make up, without impacting the education of our kids one bit. Would it be too onerous to ask that we do that rather than lay people off or cut things from our kids' education? How about other post-employee benefits that cost $2.6 million? For those who don't speak education needs, that's the cost of paying for health care for employees who stop working. Almost no private company ever does that, and with the ACA now available, there's almost no reason to do it. It's very unlikely that any parent of any OUSD kid gets that benefit from their company. Just between these two items, we could shave off pretty much all of our projected deficit, saving many jobs, keeping people from getting their pay cut, and minimizing cuts to our kids' education. Will we do that, or will we, as always seems to happen, choose to cut from jobs and our kids instead? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Any questions? Does staff have any questions? Or does the board members have any questions of staff? Over the budget issue for clarification purposes. If not, I'll close the public hearing and move on to the adoption of the preliminary budget, first reading of the proposed 2020-2021 preliminary budget. Any discussion at all that needs to occur now, or just I'll entertain a motion. Hard swallow, we'll get to do this in 2 more weeks. On second read, so.
I'll make a motion to accept it. I'm not happy about it, but
I'll second that motion.
Appreciate that and the sentiments that go along with it. I think we all are unhappy with it, but hopefully some solutions will be coming forward here in the next few weeks at the state and the federal level, at least some thumbs and dikes anyway. All right, we've got a motion and a second. A question? Yes.
Not really a question.
Statement, yeah.
I put in the chat, and I'm just gonna second what Eric talked about. These deep cuts are totally going to prevent us from supporting our students coming back and public education. Sitting on the LCAP committee, we had so many plans to support our students with technology, social, emotional, and all of this is devastating. There's a number, call it, be hooked up with your local lawmaker, and tell them you want them to fund education. Hi.
Hi. President Blessing got knocked off. He's going to rejoin us real quick so we can finish out the important pieces of our meeting.
And take a look at your chat box. I put the phone number in there.
So they're going to do that. All right. So I pushed the wrong button on this earphone and it cut me off. I was trying to figure out how to deal with the echo because when we're talking in here, it echoes in my earphones. You too? No. Well, that's the other mute, right? On this little phone here. All right. We are moving forward to item 12. Policy 12A, approval of board policy 6157 regarding distance learning. We have a staff presentation.
Yes, good evening, Board of Trustees, President Blessing. This is in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We needed to update our policies on distance learning, including providing support for teachers and families in providing that learning through professional learning, and this aligns with the most current laws available around distance learning.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lovey. Any questions for staff? Do not have any public requests to speak on this, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the board policy 6157 regarding distance learning. Got a motion?
Move to approve.
Got a motion?
Second.
And a second from Member Alvarez. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Item 12B, approval of new board policies 4113.5, 4213.5, 4313.5 regarding working remotely. Again, staff presentation.
Good evening, board. This is Todd McAteer, Associate Chief of HR again. This is a new board policy for us that addresses the topic of working remotely. District may, for reasons for efficiency or in times of natural disaster, deem it necessary for employees to work remotely. This new board policy gives us a definition and terms and conditions for how that work would be carried out.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Any questions for staff? No public on this one, so I'll entertain a motion to approve these new board policies.
I'll make a motion.
Member Stacy McGinn, second. Eleanor Evans. I see no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Next item is a resolution regarding Black Lives Matter. We do have one public member to speak on this, but would we like the staff to read this resolution?
Yes, the presentation tonight will be a full reading of the resolution.
Great.
A resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Oceanside Unified School District to declare that Black Lives Matter. Whereas, in response to both currently and historically disparate treatment of African Americans, a nationwide movement has arisen to assert that Black Lives Matter. And whereas a national movement has arisen to assert that Black Lives Matter on the campuses that serve all children. And whereas the killing of unarmed Black men and women, including queer and trans persons of color, has left young people searching for answers to incredibly complicated and infuriating questions. And whereas throughout our nation's history, institutional and structural racism and injustice have led to deepening racial disparities across all sectors of society and have lasting negative consequences for our communities, cities, and nation. And whereas, historically, when Black people have fought for a more democratic society, the lives of all people have improved. And conversely, each time barriers to Black people's potential have been erected, our whole society has suffered. And whereas shouting loudly that Black Lives Matters does not negate our commitment to all of our students, but rather elevating Black students' struggle to trust that our society values them, we must affirm that their lives specifically matter. And whereas the problems of society are mirrored in schools, and these problems can only be fully addressed with a united effort of community and school coming together for the betterment of our students' future. And whereas numerous and diverse community groups, residents, and teachers wish to participate in the education, reflection, dialogue, and action in order to engage educational communities throughout Oceanside in activities that support the understandings and affirmations that underlie the Black Lives Matter movement. And now, therefore, be it resolved, the Oceanside Unified School District Board of Trustees declare that the lives of our Black students matter. The lives of our Black families matter. The lives of our Black teachers and staff members matter. And that all Black lives matter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for reading that into the record so everybody out at home could hear that. The words are powerful. I think it's a strong resolution, and I'm very, very supportive of it. And I'm sure we all are. Should we take the public input first? All right. Dan, can you call on the public member to address us on this item?
Yes. Palm Ah.
Palm Ah. Great.
My title is Homa Ahali Alom. I'm a lifelong Oceanside resident, parent of a middle schooler, and an employee. And most of you know me as Elise Davis. My title, Homa, is my Indigenous title. I'm Indigenous to America, an American Aborigine. The identity of my people has been taken from us, and we've been falsely labeled as colored, Negro, Black, and African American through menacing tactics and paper genocide. I first want to say thank you for putting out this resolution. Thank you for acknowledging the struggles my community faces on a daily basis. And thank you for taking the time to recognize my community. I do have want to pose a couple of questions. One, are you aware that the Black community encompasses a number of people who don't actually identify as Black or African American? As I mentioned in my introduction, I'm an American Aborigine, Indigenous to America. My lineage goes back to the southeastern states. I believe there's an opportunity here to inform and educate our students, staff, and community on this to further discuss the importance of making space for Indigenous students to feel included in this resolution. My next question is, did you know that the Black Lives Matter movement is largely funded by George Soros, an elitist multi-billionaire who is known to fund organizations that overthrow governments and cause havoc? Did you know that the mainstream media's portrayals of these riots happening didn't start organically, and that many of those people destroying historically Indigenous and urban neighborhoods were paid provocateurs by Black Lives Matter and Antifa? My biggest concern is that Black Lives Matter has political ties that should be met with caution. However, the tenets of this movement do fall in line with what OUSD is seeking to remedy social injustices within my community. My final thought is in reference to the final bullet point of the resolution, where you state that many groups are seeking to engage educational communities throughout Oceanside and activities that support understanding of Black Lives Matter. Which groups are these, and is there opportunity for me or like-minded individuals to join in these activities? My passion is to share our true Indigenous history with our students and community. I would love nothing more than to be involved in this, because this is about building a legacy for my daughter, for our Indigenous Aborigine students, and our students who identify as Black or African American. This is truly a time to right some wrongs, and I'm again thankful that OUSD is making this statement with this resolution and being a leader for other districts to follow. I hope to continue this conversation with you in the near future, because we have a great opportunity to have a dialogue about a difficult topic, while also discussing ways to see tangible actions come out of this resolution.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments and take them to heart. And there'll be opportunities for engagement. Just watch us go here. Any other discussion amongst the board and statements? All right.
Yes, I would like to compliment my colleagues for having the courage and much needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delaware. All right. Yep, Eric.
I just add, I'm really proud of and a clear statement without hesitation that Black lives do matter. I also recognize that this is the start, and we've started the work, and now we need to follow through and have, just as Mama said, the hard dialogue and the work that follows in what needs to be done. So thank you. Thank you all for staying together.
Absolutely. All right. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
I can.
Got a motion. Got a motion and a second from Eric Joyce. No further discussion. I think we all said it, and we all know we got to make it happen. I appreciate the staff's work on this very much so. I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0 unanimously. Thank you again. All right, that is the completion of the regular agenda. We now have a few more public comments. So Ann, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, we have 3. The first one will be Molly Diamond.
Molly Diamond, great.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Good evening, board members. My name is Molly Diamond, and my children have gone to school on Camp Pendleton for the last 6 years. I would like to state that about the possible opening of schools and how they are being proposed to open. I would like to point out that the Superintendent Thurman's guidelines are just that. They are just guidelines. They are not orders to be followed. Living on base, we especially need schools to reopen at full capacity. Military kids live constantly changing lives, but the one constant that they have is school. They need that school for balance and structure. They need to be able to go to school and learn and play with their friends. At recess, they should be able to do this without all the extra safety restrictions. In a special ed environment, I don't think any of these guidelines can actually be imposed and not be in violation of faith and idea. My second point that I would like to make is that June 8th, the WHO said that pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic transmission of COVID is very rare. And also on June 1st, the Arrett Law Firm of San Diego filed a lawsuit against the San Diego health officer for her mask mandate, as it is a violation of both U.S. and California constitutional rights. Our kids need to be able to return to school as normal in a normal functioning environment without mask mandates and extreme restrictions. I would also like to point out that there are many dual active duty military that send their kids to school on base, and they're being put in positions where they have to choose between going to work or staying home with their children, and a lot of them can't do that without being disciplined. So there's no child care that's available. And if after school care is provided, well then what's the point of not going to school all day anyway, because they're still going to be in that same position with after school care that they would be in school. Thank you for letting me speak, and I hope you take my comments to heart.
Thank you very much, Molly. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Madison.
Are you connecting in, Todd? Okay. Hang in there. We're trying to find you, Todd.
There we go. We're here.
All right.
Thanks.
Great.
Gotta be a challenge finding somebody in all this. I don't know if the raise hand thing helps, but I've been trying to do that. But anyway, so we've talked about contract negotiations, we've talked about budgets. Let's talk about some good things. As we wrap up the school year, I wanted to again commend the district staff and teachers on the efforts they put into dealing with the COVID crisis. We know it's been difficult. Certainly there are things that we might have done a bit differently if we had time to plan it, but we didn't. I think there's ways parents think we work better for the kids, but overall, given the challenges we faced, I think everyone's done pretty well with it. Communication has been particularly exceptional. A great job by Dr. Vitale, Matt, and his team with the updates. I commend the board as well on that. The recent communication was awesome, very nicely done. I was there last Sunday marching with the crowd. It was a nice, peaceful demonstration of how democracy is supposed to work. The last DPAC meeting blew our prior record for parent participation out of the park. Stacy and I grew the attendance from 45 to 50 plus, but I don't think we ever thought in our wildest dreams we'd get 150 people to pay attention to a DPAC meeting. That was tremendous. Thanks to all the parents out there now paying more attention to that, as well as things like this board meeting. We need that. Please keep it up. Hopefully the district's paying attention to this and will continue to at least live stream meetings when we go back to the physical gatherings. Meanwhile, we just heard the district's work groups are about to report their findings in the next meeting. I trust with 188 people involved, we've got a nice representative sample of perspectives. Given the importance of this, I'd suggest we break the normal DPAC tradition and schedule a meeting to discuss. Parents are critical in this process. We just saw over 4,000 parents felt strongly enough to respond to the survey. 53% of them want to have traditional school restart. I don't know what the final plan will be, but we need parents involved before the plans are finalized. We normally take a vacation break, but right now we can't afford to cut parents out of the process. Many might even be able to attend from the beach somewhere with an umbrella drink in one hand and their phone in the other. When we try to figure out how best to serve our kids this fall, maybe more than one umbrella drink might be necessary. Recovery time on the beach should be prescribed for everyone. Let's think about that and consider making it happen. Let's also keep the parent participation momentum going. For parents listening tonight, consider staying in the loop on meeting schedules by following the DPAC Facebook group or the Oceanside Unified Schools Parent Network. Let's figure this all out together. I think we can do it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And no further speakers? Yeah. One more? Is there one more? Okay.
Marianne Kenji?
Yes.
Marianne, if you're in the room, could you press the raise hand function, or if you're on the phone, press star 9.
Want me to repeat that?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Great. Okay, so I am an Oceanside resident. I've been a nurse for 35 years, and I have a company, ATC Healthcare, located in Carlsbad, with approximately 22 to 23 offices throughout the country. We are currently being engaged in COVID testing for school districts and for businesses throughout the country. Everybody's going back to work. They want to make sure their employees are safe. They want to make sure their students are safe. And so what we have set up
is a testing and surveillance program. It has 4 levels. I sent it to Dr. Vitale and to Ann, given this afternoon. And it involves assessment, swabs, antibody testing for staff and or students. I'd like to address quickly that other speakers' comments on the asymptomatic versus pre-symptomatic. The World Health Organization mentioned in the last 24 hours, they're finding that asymptomatic people are not super spreaders. And the CDC is conflicting with the message saying they are super spreaders. I want to clarify that pre-symptomatic, which is what the World Health Organization mentioned today, can be anyone. They can be asymptomatic. They can be someone with a cold, with a headache, with a sore throat. They can have no symptoms, and then several days later they can develop pre-symptoms and then full-blown COVID. So what we are doing is we have set up a plan for testing and surveillance of school systems, school districts, so that the employee has some idea of whether they have had COVID and developed antibodies, or that they may have COVID and they need to take 14 days of quarantine. All you need is one pre-symptomatic person, and then you've got a big problem. And I spent 4 weeks in New York at NYU, and the average age was 18 to 85, the whole gamut, and they were sick. I've never seen anything like this in all of my years as a nurse. It is a devastating illness, as everyone now knows. I got to see it firsthand, unfortunately. So with people opening up businesses now, they want the knowledge that their employees are safe, and the parents want the security that their kids are not being exposed to this virus at school. So I left the information with Ann. I left it with Dr. Vitale. As I said, we're currently contracting with schools and school districts throughout the country, and I thought as part of your risk management program, you might want to consider this.
Great. Thank you very much for presenting us with that information.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Thank you.
Any other speakers, Ann? That's it, right? Okay. So we are concluded now with the agenda item. We have item 14, any board staff discussion to carry us through the rest of the evening. Raquel?
I just want to, because I know we just consolidated our nutritional services. And so for all the nutritional services that were all the different sites, I want to applaud you all and thank you for all your hard work at each one of those sites, because I know it was an effort and a task. And I thank you so much again for all that you've done for all those families at all those locations. And as we move forward into just the 3 locations, I ask that you would just continue to know that their services are there and to utilize whatever it is that you need at those locations. So again, to the nutritional services, to Shannon and her group, I applaud you all for the amazing work that you're all doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Anyone else? Eric?
Yeah, we can't get all the graduation because they're on that day. So I just want to make sure everyone has really crowded and we got every single one because we're in the divide conference.
Yeah.
I just want to say congratulations to class 2020.
Thank you. And I want to just say to all the staff, I really appreciate the work that you guys have all done, and the board members as well here this last 12 weeks or so. And it's incredible with the COVID situation and then with the national tragedy of George Floyd. Very, very difficult times for everybody, and this rollback, coming back into the classroom is going to be a roller coaster ride. It really just getting the tip of it, it seems to me, about people's opinions and approach, and it's going to be a challenge. And we all got to stay together as best we can, even though we have different opinions at times. We got to keep the train moving in the right direction here, and keep giving good direction to staff here. I know we'll do that for Julie and the rest of the staff, and then we'll perform for us. They've shown they can do that, and they will do that. So I just want to share that with you. All right, I will adjourn this meeting.